Thank you. So good afternoon. Welcome to the February 19th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. Can I just have a quick show of hands? How many are here about 130 Shelley? Okay, we're going to move. I'm going to ask for an amendment to the agenda so that we can move that to the front, so you don't have to sit here for the next 2 hours to listen to all the other stuff. How's that? Is that okay? We like to listen to you. Thank you. Yeah. So do I, unfortunately, sometimes. Is that all right? You want to sit? You want to sit, or you want me to move it forward? Move it? Okay, good. Thank you. I need okay. We need to make 2 amendments to the agenda in recognition of a large number of people here, and I propose that we move the agenda items 4A 1 and 2 to item 2 so we can consider this matter first. And then secondly, I would ask that we amend the agenda by adding an item to section 91A, I should have my glasses on, yes, of the community charter to address an item regarding identifiable individuals holding an appointed position for the municipality. So I need that along with all of this. And I need a mover and seconder for the consent agenda with that. All right, moved by Councillor Chandler and seconded by Councillor O'Brien. Thank you, folks. All those in favor? There we go. All right, so now we need to find. Pardon me? Yeah. No. So we're going to do the third reading, Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 1492.5, a text amendment for an affordable housing provision in the community use public/private PU designation. And number 2 is the Zoning and Development Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 2000.128, a map amendment to public institutional P1C at 130 Shelley Road. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Chandler. So, if we can. Do we want to have any discussion on this? All right. I'm going to give mine first, and then you can come in second. How's that? I've given this rezoning. I'm just going to get another glass of water. A lot of consideration since we held our public meeting back on January the 20th. The audience brought up at that time, at the public meeting, brought up a number of concerns that deserve to be taken seriously. I'd like to address those concerns and then my recommendations. First off, at no time did anyone on council or staff say that we were building on the estuary, the riparian area, or the floodplain. It was always our intention that should this be approved, we would build on the approximately 2.65 acres at the corner of Tulip and Shelley Road. This currently is an area that has one single-family dwelling located at the rear of the property. The site is currently zoned RS1, and it would be very easy to subdivide this block of land into small building lots, and there could be a minimum of 8 building lots for single-family dwellings there. The subdivision could be completed without any public consultation and no rezonings required. I feel that in keeping with our intent to densify the population on any lands that the city currently owns and is being considered to develop, we must increase the densification over single-family residential type lots wherever possible. It is also felt that to attempt to increase the densification to greater than RS2 would be more than this neighborhood could hold. This zoning, in my humble opinion, fits well within the neighborhood. There have been some concerns expressed about the location relevant to services such as grocery stores or schools. My comment to that is that the distance from 130 Shelley Road to a grocery store or school is no more than in many other locations around town. I did measure the distance out for comparison purposes. The same is applicable for the bus route. And again, there are many spots around town further from bus routes than this one, and yet people living here seem to manage quite well. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But the closer you get to the amenities, the more expensive the real estate becomes and the less affordable the project will be. Our objective is to get the cost of development as low as we possibly can so that we can appeal to people with lower incomes. It has been recommended that we sell the upper portion and buy a piece of land in someone else's backyard. That may appear to be a good solution, except all the funds from the sale, up to $740,000, would have to go back into the Park Fund and DCC Reserve, leaving virtually nothing to spend on the new property. Having said all this, I would like to address some of the concerns that the residents expressed and how we can satisfy that. I will be proposing a number of amendments to this zoning by way of a covenant. Prior to final adoption of the zoning amendment bylaw, a covenant could be registered on title of the parent parcel, restricting the development to the upper western area above the floodplain and steep bank. Should we decide, sorry, I just lost everything. Should we decide to donate the upper portion of the land with the P1C designation on the whole parcel, would then apply for a subdivision of the property forming a Lot A and a Lot B. Lot A would be a rectangular parcel that would begin far enough from the top of the bank to protect the bank in the future. We could direct staff to prepare a park designation bylaw for the entire part of Lot B. That would encompass all the lands in the estuary, the floodplain, and the wildfire area. Prior to subdivision, we would require a number of reports to be completed before severance would be granted, such as geotech report, environmental assessment by qualified professionals. We would register a covenant that requires any future building on the subject properties to conform to the currently multi-family residential development permit area guidelines, and that council resolution be required to approve the final design prior to the building permit issuance. I believe that these will protect the lands as requested by the vast majority of our community. If my amendments are approved, then I will be supporting the rezoning. So, Councillor Wilson and Councillor O'Brien, then Councillor Patterson. You want to change places? Okay, fair enough. Please, Councillor Patterson then.
Thank you, Worship. So just to clarify, we're in third reading of bylaw, and you would like to put the covenants in place at this time? Before adoption? Because I'll be honest, that would be about the only way that I'm supporting and that. So you can let the rest of the audience know or can hear.
Excuse me, just to be clear, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to be clear, that would be done at the time and be conditional for the rezoning. Okay, so we would make it that way. So it's all covered off. Does that make sense to you?
What I'm looking for is, I guess, for you to have a motion in place or ask to have that at this point in time.
If I may, Your Worship, we have a motion on the floor to consider third reading. We would need to amend that motion and basically add in a condition, which is actually fairly typical, that we would impose conditions before final adoption. So if the items that you covered, I'm not sure if you have a motion prepared to bring forward, but I think it would be prudent to either withdraw the motion to give third reading and amend it by giving third reading with the conditions attached.
What's easier for you?
It's easier if we withdraw the motion and do the...
We're
doing both. So, no, so when we're considering the rezoning, if you want to amend the motion, sorry, did we do a motion to receive? So when we're considering third reading, if you want to add a condition, we would basically have the motion read with all of those conditions being fulfilled prior to final adoption. So then, before it's brought back for fourth reading, we would require evidence of the covenant being registered on title, is essentially how it would work.
If I may, Your Worship, through to the CAO. But I was under the impression that number one, if they're being considered separately, that have to be considered because they're two separate bylaws. So Plan Parksville Amendment Bylaw is what we should be addressing very first, as the mayor initial remarks was about the zoning and putting covenants on it, but we haven't actually discussed. In fact, the debate only should have been actually regarding the OCP Amendment Bylaw. Is that not correct?
If I may, Your Worship, I believe what we have right now is we do often read things together. So I think we need to withdraw the motion and read them separately, but with the conditions. So essentially the new motion for the rezoning would not be just to give it third reading. It would be conditional upon the items that the mayor mentioned, and we would need to craft a motion to that effect. So I think at the moment, the best option would be to withdraw. Whoever moved and seconded, sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Councillor Greer and Councillor Chandler would withdraw. We would read them separately and then amend the motion for the zoning. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Well, no, it doesn't make sense, because all of this, we already studied and reviewed what this Parksville Amendment Bylaw was to read. And now, before we even debate that, the mayor's making alterations to that. But the thing is that reality is that this is just like, how do we even get our head around what, I mean, the mayor, he's making changes to it, but get our head around it just like this. There's a lot of research, and this should be addressed. This should be either approved or defeated first, in my opinion, before we go on to any amendments. If you want to reintroduce a new proposal afterwards, I would say that's the time to do it.
If I may, Your Worship, so at the moment, both bylaws are being read together, and so that's what we've moved and seconded. So I think we need to withdraw that so that you're separating them out and considering them separately. So the first item is the OCP amendment. You are correct,
yes,
Councillor O'Brien. The second item would then be, essentially we wouldn't be just giving it third reading. So you would have a new motion on the floor to consider third reading subject to the conditions that the mayor has outlined, and then council would debate that. So at the moment, we are considering them together, which is a typical way that we do it, but I think we need to withdraw the motion and then look at them separately. So we would currently then just be talking about the OCP amendment first,
right,
and the rezoning second, but we would have a new motion on the floor at that time. Okay?
I can live
Does that
with
make
that.
sense?
I can live with that.
Okay, so we would then need approval from Councillors Greer and Chandler to withdraw.
Then we need a mover and a seconder for Planville Parksville Amendment Bylaw 2019, number 1492.5. Moved it, seconded by Councillor O'Brien. All right. Discussion? Councillor O'Brien, and then Councillor Wilson. Yeah, Councillor O'Brien, then Councillor Wilson.
unless, of course, Councillor Patterson wants to go first because she doesn't like following me. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, and Your Worship. Regarding the OCP amendment bylaw, the current designation of this property is, I'm speaking of 130 Shelley, in case that all got confused. The current designation of community use public-private in the OCP was arrived after much community and plan department consultations and does not in its objectives provide an allowance for housing of any type. To suggest that housing should be allowed is disrespectful of the entire OCP process, whereby allowing for a wholesale rewording of this document bylaw that would provide for this amendment to apply to all properties in Parksville with the same community use designation would also be affected by this little amendment. So this suggested change is less than transparent. I'm sorry. Since many other citizens of Parksville and members of the OCP revision panels believed really that this change that was happening this afternoon and was dealt with at the public hearing, that it was only just referring to the property at 130 Shelley Road. It is not. Any other community use OCP identified lands in Parksville would be affected by this, whereby housing could be put on it and a community use, sorry, yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that it would be less than transparent. It says the other citizens believe that it was only referring to 130 Shelley Road, which is definitely not the case. So the locations for the housing developments are clearly identified in the OCP, and this is not one of them. The OCP committee didn't feel that this was a good spot for housing, and so they didn't include it. And the reason, I was on that OCP committee, and due to the sensitive ecological nature of this property, which fortunately was recognized by my colleagues and the other people from the public that had input at the time, didn't say, by the way, this should have housing on it. They did not. So I recognize that Parksville has been discovered, and we have a building boom going on, which is even more reason to respect our OCP that provides for balance and planned growth areas while protecting our environmentally sensitive areas. Yeah, I know, I just wanted to make sure I was addressing you. Which is, sorry? It's a great time. I recognize that Parksville has been discovered and we have a building boom occurring, which is even more reason to respect our OCP that provides for balance and planned growth areas while protecting our environmentally sensitive areas, which is probably one of the main reasons that Parksville is proving to be such a desirable place to live. I will not be supporting this OCP amendment bylaw. Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what could I say, Councillor O'Brien? I think you took some of the words out of my mouth. At least you covered off on one thing. There is another point that I'd like to make, and that's with regard to the Plan Parksville amendment. I have a real problem rezoning without some sort of concept in place. So most developers who come forward and they want to rezone have at least something in place. There's nothing here. So this is a wide open whatever. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm against that. So, but we're not voting on the next issue of the actual OCP. Okay, so I'm absolutely against it as well. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson? Okay. Just as a point, this was forwarded by council to staff to draft this, so that, and just so we remember that. All right. Any other points? I'll call the question on number one. For third reading, all those in favor of question number one? Opposed? You're voting in favor?
Currently, if he doesn't vote, it's in favor.
Yeah, you voted in favor, just so you know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. If you don't vote, it's an affirmative vote. So. You may, certainly. Oh, it has been recorded. We have all the ones. It's a passed vote. No, it passed. Four votes to 3. It did. Okay, we'll do it again, just so you can count. All those in favor of number 1, motion number 1. 1, 2, 3, and Councillor Fraz does not vote, so that means it's an affirmative vote. It's in favor. Oh, come on. I don't make the rules, folks. It's Robert's rules. It's right there. Pardon? All those not in favor? Yes, okay. All right. Why? But you can rezone. It's not. Okay. Okay. No, I'm being told that we can't consider number 2 until it's, and we have to defer it till we work our way through that. Okay. So we'll move on to the next point. There you go, folks. You've got.
So if I may, through the chair? Procedure.
Yes.
So we just defeated the OCP amendment zoning bylaw. So this, in fact, defeats the entire rezoning of the property, and the public hearing is that just, yes. I'm saying there's going to be no time to speak to the public hearing.
If I may, Your Worship, we had the public hearing report received at the previous meeting. We cannot adopt a bylaw that's contrary to the OCP, so we cannot consider third reading at this time because that bylaw is now contrary to the OCP because the OCP amendment was defeated. So the OCP amendment has not been accepted. We cannot consider a zoning amendment that's contrary to the OCP. Ever.
Unless you change the OCP. Let's move on. Can we close that back door? Thank you. So we're on item number 2. We have 2 pieces of correspondence on the agenda. One from the Environment and Climate Change Canada requesting to conduct research on the Salish seagulls. I need a motion to receive. Moved by, I'm sorry, it'll just take me a second to get this all sorted out in my brain. Councillor Patterson and second by Councillor Greer. All those in favor? Unless somebody wants to debate that, I don't see that being there.
If they want us to, are you going to approve
Pardon me?
Yeah, we need a motion.
I'm-
We need a motion to let them do it.
To let them,
To
to-
let
oh,
them do it.
yeah.
If I could make a motion to approve the request for the research they're asking
Yes.
to conduct?
We have wording here if you like for it, so, okay. I need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Patterson, any discussion?
If I may, Your Worship, if I could just make an addition, an amendment to Councillor Fraz's, to approve of what the environmental group is doing so, only with the proviso that they provide us with the statistics and report copies when they're completed?
We can ask for it.
Yes. Yeah, otherwise, yes. Thank you.
It's a friendly amendment, I would expect, so are you okay with that? All right. All those in favor? Carried. And we have one from the Regional District of Nanaimo, correspondence, that is Northern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw 897.07.2020. This bylaw proposes to include electoral area H in the preamble and repeal Regional District of Nanaimo Custom Transit Parasite, and on and on. But any questions on this? I need a mover to receive. Adam, Councillor Greer. Recommendations, we've received it, that the Council of the City of Parksville consent on behalf of the electors to the adoption of the Northern Community Transit Service Area Amendment Bylaw, and that the Regional District of Nanaimo be notified accordingly. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Mrs. Weeks, please.
Thank you. Last spring, Council issued a license of occupation to the Chamber for 3 food trucks on the 2 mobile food vending pads in the community park. The license included an option to renew with the current holder for the 2020 season. The Chamber has requested a renewal for this season, but is also requesting a few additional changes in the park as a result of user feedback. These are noted in Schedule 1 of the report and would require a separate resolution should Council wish to direct staff to implement any of the requests. And the recommendation to renew the license is as per the Council agenda.
I need a mover and a seconder. Are you moving?
I'd just like to move recommendation number 1.
Okay, we're breaking them up. Okay. I need a seconder for number 1. Councillor Patterson, discussion. Everybody okay with that? All those in favor? Opposed? Number 2. What? You don't like receiving? Number 2, that Council approve the request to renew the Parksville Community Park Mobile Food Concession License of the occupation agreement with Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce for the 2020 season. Do you want that separated as well?
Could we make a different motion out of that?
So you want it separated, first
Yeah.
off. All right. Yeah, do you want to change it? Give us what you're suggesting.
My motion would be that we refer this license of occupation agreement back to staff for some amendments, and then we could discuss some of those, what those amendments would be. But at this point, I'd like to refer it back to staff.
Yeah, just refer it. You just refer it to staff. All right, I need a seconder. Councillor Greer? Any discussion?
Ken?
Oh, on referral? None. None. All, yeah.
So if I can then just clarify the point of order there, I want to give some direction as
You
to.
can't, sorry, once it's been
If we
referred,
refer
it's
back
over.
to staff, what would the staff be doing with it then?
You can give it to them, or you can give us a new motion if you like.
Okay.
Referral has no debate.
I'm just wondering how we could send it back to staff with some adjustments to it.
Could talk to us,
Just let them know, then they'll take it on.
and then we would bring it back as amended. So
I'd just like to get some of council's input in there too, because I don't want to be just sole input to staff. And
we shouldn't refer it then.
what would be more
Well,
appropriate?
If I may, Your Worship, if Councillor Fraz's intent is to discuss some changes, I think my recommendation would be that we discuss those changes under
Number 2?
under number 2, and before we call the vote, and then if council wishes to make amendments, they would defeat that motion, and we would amend it on as that way. Because if we refer, we're not allowed to debate any further. Would that work?
I guess with that, the part that confused me then is we would be approving it before making any changes, so.
If I may, Your Worship, we would just be, we wouldn't, before we call the question, we would defer, we would basically defeat it. So you need a motion on the floor to discuss it. So what my recommendation would be was that you, you move and second the second item,
Okay.
and then prior to calling the question, hopefully we've had that debate, and then we can amend or defeat this one.
Okay, so I'll withdraw my motion of referring it back to
Okay,
staff.
so we're no longer referred. All right,
So we need a mover and second on number 2,
Num-
and then we will debate.
all right.
Okay. So
Moved by
instead of-
Councillor,
Move
then you
number
have to
2.
vote in affirmative, though.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
He
Says
just
so.
has
To
to
move it?
state his reasons for not.
Okay, go ahead. You doing it? Let's do it this way. Councillor Patterson's making
Okay.
the first, and then you can second it
Right.
and vote against it. It's just easier that way. All right. Do you have comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. So at this time, because I'm not familiar with Councillor Fraz's the thought process for bringing it back to staff, if I could ask what some of those items may be.
Right, so there's a number of items in this license occupation agreement that I think could be reviewed from what we had last year. They're not in any particular order, but what they would be based around is things like the responsibility of garbage cleanup for the food trucks out there. Some that was noticed, it's garbage, while there was extra bins, the garbage wasn't being removed, so it was often that birds were coming out there to open bins and strewing the garbage all over the place in the mornings. Things like there's a third truck that we had allowed for, which was, the intent was it to be an occasional third truck. What ended up happening is that the third truck was operated more so than not. In fact, I don't recall a time when there was any less than 3 trucks out there, aside from things like on Canada Day weekend where there was no trucks on those pads. So I didn't think that was very appropriate, considering there was other events going on, but for the license occupation where we're renting out those pads, there was no trucks operating there on a very busy long weekend. Along with that, there was times when there was a 4th truck that had no approval for a 4th truck, but there was a 4th one operating there. So I think we need to look at, if there's trucks beyond the 2 for the 2 pads, there should be a fee with them equal to operating the other 2 trucks. And if there's things like a 4th truck operating without approval, that there be some, I don't know, you'd say perhaps a fine or so levied for operating outside the agreement. So those are primarily some of the issues that I would be looking to make some amendments around.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with what Councillor Fraz has said. I was always under the opinion when they were down there, we were getting paid from all of them. I wasn't aware that we were just getting paid for 2. Maybe you could answer that.
If I may, Your Worship, we did adjust the fee when the 3rd truck was added, so it was prorated that there's basically a charge for 3 trucks, not for anything more than 3 trucks.
Thank you, Your Worship. And also, I thought that we had in previously, like last year, we adjusted or spoke of the garbage issue, that the garbage, there's a considerable amount of garbage left over after the trucks had closed. And so now, as Councillor Fraz has pointed out, that seems to have not been addressed, although I thought we addressed it in the contract we provided last year. And yet here we are again. And so we're asking for it to be adjusted again. And I have a hard time with that because I thought we already covered that. And it wasn't obviously adhered to. So the contract that they had was that they were supposed to, make sure it was clean. And so here we are again. And I agree that it needs further study.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor O'Brien and other council members, we do have a requirement in the lease that the trucks are responsible for 30-meter litter pickup. I think what happened last year was that, in what we heard anyway at the staff level, was that you couldn't always prove or link the garbage increase to the trucks alone. There were just a lot of other additional people down there. This year, with respect to the special event permits and some of the other items that we're looking at for council already, we will be tracking things a little bit differently so that we can report back to council on how much extra time we're spending cleaning washrooms and cleaning garbage. We have a new manager of parks in that area, so I think we would be able to better link, I suppose, the garbage to the food trucks or to just general busyness. The park is very, very busy at all times, and I think there is some argument perhaps that it's not just the food truck users that are using the garbage cans, although we do already have that 30-meter radius where they're responsible. So that's just one item to point out.
Thank you, and Your Worship, it's true to the CAO as well. I do recognize that too, but I also recognize that it is not just the food truck garbage, but other organizations and businesses in town anyways, McDonald's, Tim Hortons, A&W and so forth, they do also clean up the area within their 30 meters, so to speak, but they clean up other people's garbage as well. They just clean up all the garbage, whether it's their identification on it. They clean up the entire area, which is the responsible thing to do. And that's all I'm asking for the food trucks. As a responsible thing to do, say, oh, no, that's not my garbage, it's somebody else's garbage. It's in your perimeter. It should be kept clean.
Okay, so we're referring this back to staff anyways, are we not?
No, we haven't had a motion for that.
Yeah, okay, but-
The 30-meter requirement is
In the contract, all right. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our CAO, bringing this back to the Chamber of Commerce and the Executive Director, can I ask for a time period? I know that staff is incredibly busy. This goes into effect from May 1st. It's a lot of work to organize a lot of different food truck schedules because of the amount of festivals and events that are occurring on the island, so they need to have their schedule worked out as soon as possible. So could you give me a rough timeline, since it looks like it's going back to staff?
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Patterson, if this is not moved forward at this time, we would have to put a number one priority on this because of exactly the facts that you mentioned. We usually like to bring this forward at the end of January, so we're already a little bit later than anticipated. So we would make sure this gets priority number one, and we would talk to the Chamber of Commerce immediately.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I'm hearing you right, we have an agreement if there's the third truck?
Yes.
If there's a fourth truck, do we get paid for that?
No.
So it's, well, why wouldn't we charge a fourth truck?
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Greer, we have not anticipated nor provided for a fourth truck. It is only 3 trucks at this time. The fourth truck was not authorized.
It's not supposed to be 4 trucks there.
No, I understand that, but if there is 4 trucks, we should be getting paid. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Frass, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of my concerns with having the third truck there too is that now we see this year there was a request for more services to be there, and I think that's natural to get that kind of request after you have more demand out of it. So needing more power, if they're tripping breakers, well, you have more vehicles and require more power. That's one thing that comes out of it, is why I thought that it would be an occasional thing to have the third truck, so it wasn't going to be a demand on the extra power and water, that sort of thing. So I think now we need to understand, is the third truck going to be a permanent truck like we saw last year? It was there. It was there every time that I ever went down there. But as well, I'd also like to figure out some sort of I think the agreement should have some penalty in place if the trucks aren't there at all, which was another large concern when you have things like the Kennedy Long Weekend and there's no trucks at all operating there. I don't understand why there was no trucks there, but I don't think it's acceptable.
Pardon me? Yeah, we're just referring it back to staff, and we'll figure it out from there. All right. We need a motion to refer it?
No.
Is this okay?
Well, two things. We can either just do no vote, and that would come back to us, or we can refer it back to staff.
I think I'd like to refer it back to staff. Number two, I need a referral in a secondary. Yeah. March 2nd is the referral date. So moved by Councillor Greer, second by Councillor O'Brien. There we go.
Okay, and then there's no debate.
Then yeah, we're done, right? Yeah.
We need to call it,
Okay.
though, I think.
Pardon?
Is everyone in favor of that?
Of referring it?
Yeah. All in favor?
Yeah, all in favor. Okay, I'll do that.
Sorry, I'm not speaking. You won't hear me.
I can.
We can hear you.
All right. So we don't do the rest until we get it back. Okay. Installation of public art.
Okay, we can call Guy Martin.
Guy, please, if you would come forward. Mr. Martin. Has everybody met? Okay. Would you introduce your newest?
If I may, Your Worship, it is our great pleasure to introduce Guy Martin. He's the newly hired manager of Parks and Facilities and joins us with extensive. I would like to welcome Guy Martin to the City of Parksville. He is the manager of Parks and Facilities for the city, and he comes to us with many, many years of experience in municipal environments with the City of Abbotsford and the City of Langley. And we're very happy to have him here today to provide an update on the Soft Shores art exhibit.
Please.
Thank you, Kiva. Good afternoon, all, and it's a pleasure to meet you as well. So I've had a meeting with the artists, along with Councillor Wilson, just yesterday to sort of clarify some of what we run up against, requirements to do the installation. One of the concerns that we had was to ensure that we had structural support and integrity with the trusses of the roof, given that we would be hanging something from that structure. So we did contact an engineering firm that came out and gave us in their specification a price schedule of $1,500, and they would provide sealed drawings and sketches, and they believe that there is the ability to support such a structure in the neighborhood of between 500 and 750 pounds. We further looked at fabrication of a support structure that would have to go between the two trusses, and we're estimating a cost of $1,000 for that as well. We'd have to rent a lift to do the installation of that piece of support, as well as to assist the artists in the actual hanging of the structure. We've had further upon clarification some of the electrical work. We're thinking that we might be able to service the whole piece from the bottom only and not from the top and the bottom. It's two separate art pieces, I'm sure you're familiar with. So we think we can just service it from the bottom, so we've augmented our estimate on that as well. Security and of the artwork itself was something we were very concerned with, and to have some kind of crowd control or egress control around the dais that's going to be constructed by the artist to put the artwork on. And the artists did not want to have that in place. They feel it'll take away from the art, which it may, but from I guess from a liability and or insurance factor, we need to make sure that we can control people from having too much access to this artwork. We did not look into insurance at this time, and we did a great assumption on the security measures of being in the neighborhood of $2,500. So with that said, we're looking at somewhere within the neighborhood of $10,000 to $12,000 to commit to this installation. So the $3,500 that council appointed, with $2,500 of that is going to be spent on the lighting component, and understood that $1,000 of that was to be towards staff time. And that's my verbal report.
Okay. All right. We need a motion, and then we can have the discussion. Okay, so I need a motion. Is this one?
This was a suggested one, but
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Go ahead. did you have a motion for this? Or do you want us to use the recommended one?
We have one if you want to go ahead and one if you don't.
No. We have one here. So, okay, I'll read it. All right, how's that? This is I only have one, by the way. Yeah, all right.
Is that we up the budget?
Yeah.
Or we don't?
Here's what it is. We either up the budget to cover the cost, which is $12,000, or that given the additional, that's one motion that we can have. Second one is that given the additional unexpected logistical challenges and significant additional costs, the Soft Shores art installation be canceled, and that the correspondence be sent to the artists, thanking them for their willingness to have the art displayed. You're moving that one? Second by Councillor Greer. All right, let's have the discussion. Councillor Wilson, I promised Councillor Wilson she would have a chance to speak about the meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I just want to say that when Wingy and I met we have one of our artists, Krister Smith, is in the audience right now, who is a glass artist, and we met with Bob Held yesterday. In the previous report, it stated that they were going to be drilling into the concrete. I just wanted to clarify that that is not going to be the case. And I believe, Chris, I don't know whether you could maybe want to speak to the railing that you were...
You can't do that.
All right. So I think that was discussed yesterday, that that the artists may consider making a railing. I'm not sure about that, but I think that might be part of the thing. And I just want to say that it isn't, by the sounds of what we went through yesterday, going to be anywhere near as complicated as it seems. And so I just want to say that I know they're keen to move forward and share this important art sculpture and with the city of Parksville for everyone to enjoy and to gain a better understanding of the cultural and social significance of this salmon and heron piece, because it really does have a very social issue attached to this piece. So, and there also I want to say that there has been some word in the community that they really do support this, and so I'm not sure whether there might be other options that we could talk about with this. So I think it would be really nice to still keep this going if we can. Thank you.
So you're speaking against. I'm taking it. All right, Councillor O'Brien, then Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too spoke with Robert Held from Robert Held Art Glass today anyways, because I wanted clarification. And thank you, Guy, for your report. Thanks very much. You wanted the job. You're doing a great job already. But the thing is that after talking with Bob, he cleared up a lot of questions that I had regarding this whole sculpture. And one of my objections at the last council meeting that I made was not to go forward with it because it was just on a loan program. And it was, I thought, I probably made comments in the minutes that why spend all this money if it's just being loaned to us? Because it just wasn't worth it. And the location of where it was going to be, as the mayor pointed out, it was going to be stuck down by the pay wicket. So the thing is, I had objections on that grounds. But the thing is, after speaking with Bob today, he says, no. He says, we want to sell it to the city of Parksville. And to be clear, I know where you're going, just 1 second. And to be clear, the price that he came up with was $27,500, which is what he mentioned back in, I think it was like November, October. Anyways, $27,500, which is not a price that he's selling it, it's actually a gift, because a piece of this value would be clearly over $100,000. I can guarantee you it would. So the thing is, that's the first thing. And he is willing to sell it to us and not go through the art gallery to put it on a loan program or whatever. So what I'm saying is if the city went to the expense of putting it in the atrium type of thing, it's ours if we purchase it. So the other thing is that, and along with what Guy had to say as well, he said as well about the problem with the electrical and so forth. Today he said it would be better to drop it down from the ceiling. and so forth, and it would be easier to do rather than bringing 2 electrical connections and the floor, no drilling at the floor at all. He also said that he'd be willing with the artist, Mr. Smith, I believe is here, to work with creating a base around it so we didn't have to drill any floor of the tiles and so forth out in the atrium. Anyways, he's very willing to try and accommodate this, to get this here, and it's, as I say, he really would like it in the city of Parksville, really donate it to the city of Parksville. So my point is that this is moving, and as far as being requiring an RFP, maybe that's what you're going to say, an RFP to put it out for tender type of thing. If it was a donation type of thing, we don't have to go to RFP, and if it even if it's an honorarium. Okay, well, we can work through that, is all I'm saying. That we could work through that if it takes an RFP, if we have to put out an RFP for someone else to build an exhibit like this for $27,000, that someone else can do it, then so be it. Then I'd be willing to do with that. That way we have the RFP. So all that I'm saying, it's moving constantly, so I don't want it to die on the floor right now. So what I'm suggesting right now is that there's a bunch more information that's come forth, that Guy's brought forward, and Bob Held has brought forward, and Mr. Smith, that I think it's doable. There's other communities all around here that want this piece, and they're willing to pay full market value for it. They want it. They're going to pay for it. So the thing is, it's an incredible piece. It should be here in Parksville. My point, I move to refer this to staff at this time. Yes?
If I may just make a suggestion at this point, if council wishes to support the installation, we would need an amendment to the budget of $3,500 is clearly not going to cover it. But with respect to the public art and proper process, we currently have the committee, Parks and Open Space Committee, that has been recently formed. And one of the items on that committee would be to look at a policy for public art. And so if I may recommend, kind of on a process side of things, we would be better to have a policy in place with a budget established and some criteria around the types of art and how we actually advertise. And then we would have to put it out for any person who feels they want to be showcased in City Hall for a year prior to purchasing. I mean, I'm very uncomfortable with that process. It kind of feels a bit backwards that we don't have criteria, policy, procedures for artists to submit their ideas. And I think if council wishes to support it, we really should just amend the budget to cover the cost of it with no commitment that we would be buying it or anything would happen further. That's just not how we do things. Our purchasing policy says anything over $500 requires a purchase order, and anything over $20,000 we have to do bids. So unless the artist is willing to donate it for $0, I just don't see how we can do that following proper administrative procedures. However, that committee is supposed to meet very soon, and I think a policy is the right way to start with some defined parameters around where we would want to see art, what kind of art, how do we allow people to submit ideas, what kind of budget are we looking at, do we want it as part of amenities, do we want it on private land, public land? There's a lot of different things I think we can consider. That's my recommendation.
If I may, as a follow-up?
Pardon? No, we can't. No, it hasn't been. We haven't got that far.
If I may, as a follow-up to CAO, Kevin, was the $100,000 totem pole, did that go through an RFP process?
We weren't the council, though.
Yeah, I know, but that was a policy.
I wasn't CAO either. I don't know.
We can't answer that.
I can't answer.
I think not, but that's okay.
Okay.
All that I'm suggesting is that where there's a will, there's a way. I think we can make it work. That's all I'm saying.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. My opinion will be very short and quick. I think that's way too much money to put a piece of art in our hallway out here, even though it's not even the right location. And then to talk about purchasing it after that, I would not be in favor of either one.
Okay, we're discussing referrals now at this point in time. It's because that's what's on the floor is a referral. Councillor Frass.
I don't think we should be referring it back to staff. I think we should deal with it today, one way or another, to know if we're even interested or not. The staff time is very valuable, and we know that we're already loading them up with they're already to the max, and we're always asking more out of them. I'm sure this probably won't be the last thing that they'll be tasked with tonight. So I'd like to see us not add more to staff's workload.
Anybody else? Okay, hold on for a second. We got to go through the whole conference. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify that if this, if the public raise the funds for this, as people have come to me and said they might be interested in doing.
We're only talking about referring this now, not about anything else. So let's just talk about referring this. Do you have a reason for referring or not for referring? That's what we need.
Well, that's part of it. It was just what to clarify that.
It's a stretch, but yeah. Wait a minute.
I was just trying to clarify that it could be, I think if we're going to refer it to staff, it's kind of behind my process of thinking right now, that if it's donated, it's okay. And so if we're referring it back to staff, that's part of that whole conversation, that are we dropping it, we're not dropping it, we're referring it back to staff, because if somehow the money came forward and the artists were able to donate it, I'm trying to get to that.
But the point here is it's up, we have a motion on the floor to refer this particular item. So if we're going to refer it, let's refer it. If not, let's not. But we just defeat the referral at this point in time. But I need to. Point of order. So if I refer it, I have a second. We have to vote on it. I have to vote on a referral.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
So we should be calling the question right now on the referral, and if it's defeated, then we go back to talking about it.
Okay. I'll call the motion. And all those in favor of referring? 3. Not referring? Opposed? It's defeated.
So then we need to vote on the motion to either cancel.
Yes, we're now back to the Councillor Fraz's original.
So being back to the motion with not moving forward with this time, one of the reasons why I think it would be a good idea is that it doesn't mean that we can't organize other things in the meantime. This could always be brought back up later in the year. It could be brought up in another year when there's perhaps more question or more answers to the questions sorted out as to who would be paying for it or so on, or where would it go. It doesn't have to be landing in staff's lap or at this council table right now to be sorting that out. I don't think what we initially thought it would be has turned out anything like that. So at this point, I think we should just cut bait from it. And if we want to come back to it later, then we should do so then.
It's the motion that's here already. We just went back to it. It was approved and it was. And, yeah, you seconded this motion.
We're just drafting a canceling motion because the referral is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No, you had your hand up. Did you have a comment? All right. Councillor Patterson, did you have yours?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm obviously not in favor of the motion that's on the floor at this point in time. I do honestly feel that we definitely need an arts policy in the city of Parksville, and that needs to come sooner rather than later. Not the council before me, not the council, that one, I guess it's 3 councils back. We paid for a significant piece of artwork in the city of Parksville. And it was always my hope that we would increase that to every 5 years type thing, that we would very much showcase art and public art for the city of Parksville. This is a truly amazing piece of artwork. It's of cultural significance. It's of bears history of our First Nations and and our surrounding community, and it ties together so many different types of mediums in the piece. So, as I said, I won't be supporting. I think that we can probably, well, basically, I'd like to have it refer to budget deliberations for the increase in cost for the installation of the South Shore exhibit, and then we could come to a decision later to what we will do with the piece. But I honestly feel that in Parksville's 75th year, that an added artwork piece is just so fitting. It's part of why I'm on that committee, and that too, to highlight Parksville and to showcase our different artists and people in our community.
I'm going to speak, and then since this piece of art is amazing. There's absolutely no other words to describe it. I fell in love with it when I was over at the MAC, and it was all there and in its glory in the center of the stage. So it was a great piece of art. When it came to us, it was, oh, all we have to do is spend $3,500, put some electricity here, put a fence around it or whatever, and we would be in great shape at that point in time. It's gotten significantly different from that at this point in time, and I'm very confused. You know, are we selling it for $27,000, or are we buying it rather, I'm sorry, for $27,000, or is it a donation? If it's a donation, does that work for us with our purchasing policy? I believe it does, Councillor O'Brien. I think if it doesn't cost us a dime, it should qualify for this. As of this morning, I was hearing of holes in the floor and a permanent fence, and that it was still going to be, at that point in time, going to be down in the lower lobby. There's so many things, and everybody seems to have different opinions here. So, I'm basically very confused as to what we're actually even talking about, quite frankly. Are we going to own it? Are we just borrowing it? Is it going to cost us $3,500? Right now, we're at $12,000, but we're hearing that those numbers may not be right. I'm sorry, I can't vote on this in any particular direction because I don't know what I don't know at this point. So please help me out if somebody can. But I'm sorry, you can't talk. I apologize, but you can't.
If I may, Your Worship, I think just from a staff perspective to clarify a couple of things, we do still need to put railings around it for our liability insurance. Typically, that does require a very stable railing, which we would need to anchor to the ground in some way. There might be some engineering solutions there, but that's probably going to cost us something. We are still hearing from the building owners that it is not able to be located in the center of the atrium. It will be in front of the finance wickets, which is what was discussed with council at the last meeting. We do still, the $12,000 that we've gotten, we think is a reasonable quote to provide the electrical, the supports that need to be put in place for the roof to hang. It's about 750 pounds, I believe, the structure. And so the $12,000 cost is basically what we feel is a reasonable cost. Does not include staff time, but that's already kind of paid for in some ways. And it doesn't include the additional insurance, which I don't think that would be significantly more. I would say no more than probably a few $100s a year for the additional insurance. But I think, it certainly wasn't anticipated when council brought it forward that all of these logistical issues would come up. And I certainly, as your CAO, I'm not comfortable with us advancing any discussion of purchasing without following proper administrative procedures. So my recommendation would be that's not discussed at this time. We're simply discussing whether we up the budget to accommodate the logistical challenges that we've encountered, or we're given direction to not pursue it at this time.
If I may, Your Worship, to address two issues there regarding the location in the atrium or over by the wicket and so forth. I was blown away, I have to admit, when I found out that other owners of this building or tenants of this building, I'm not sure, I guess the partnership of this building, would actually, a school board would actually say no to a significant piece of art actually hanging front and center in the atrium. And does the school board, are they turning this down because they think that they're going to be on the hook for a certain percentage? I mean, seriously, if the partnership of this building, we should say $27,000, you give us $9,000 and we'll hang it by the wicket. But, you know, they're not having to pay for anything. We're not asking them for any contribution here. So for them to have such a say in where it goes instead of being front and center where it should be, I find that rather disappointing. Secondly, I would like to somehow, with your recommendation, Ms. Kaler, is to buy us some time. And by that, I'm saying buy us time two ways, because the Parks Committee is getting ready to convene very shortly. And I know these people, and they can work fast if needed. So the thing is that to come up with proper policies. But the other thing I want to buy time for is, this piece is so important for Parksville. I want to look at corporate sponsorships of somebody else in this town, a corporate sponsor, buying this piece and donating it to the city of Parksville, which would be a nil cost. And then if they're really generous, they can pay for the installation costs as well. But the thing is that with that in mind, I want to buy some time. I don't want to kill this whole thing, because the artists have every right to say, we're going to find another buyer. We already have one. I know they have 3. And they're going to make way more money. So the thing is that I don't want them to say, okay, they don't want it, we're moving on. So I want to buy some time to give us a couple other options to make this happen. I'm asking for your advice.
If I may, Your Worship, I believe that unfortunately that would be referring it back to staff, and that was just defeated. My suggestion would be that a councillor can bring this forward, as Councillor Patterson suggested, during budget discussion, or to add a new line item. Or we could just have a new motion come forward at any time with that new information. So if there's something about a cost implication.
Can I solve this?
Yeah.
Councillor O'Brien, listen to me and hear what I say. Maybe I can help. Let's postpone this. I'll make the motion to postpone this until
March 2nd or budget? Or?
no, sometime in March. It's got to be March. When is your meeting? March 3rd? Then in March 2nd is not going to do me a lot of good, is it? So what's the meeting after that? The 16th? I make the motion that we postpone until March 16th, this whole conversation. Is that all right with everybody? All right. Just a different word. All right? Are we okay with that? We need to take a vote. Or, no, you don't. All right. So I'm taking a vote. All in favor? Can you discuss it? I don't know if you can. No, it's not debatable on postponing. That's why. All right, so all in favor? Opposed? It's carried. All right, so after all of that.
So we're not doing anything.
We're just postponing it. All right? You guys have to come up with the yeah.
We're almost done, and then we're going to take a break.
No, we're going to be a while.
No?
We're going to be a while. I'm really prepared to give you a 5-minute break. Yeah, I think it's good. All right, let's take a 5-minute break, if everybody will. All right, let's go. I want to get home sometime before New Year's. So, bylaws, final adoption, zoning and development amendment bylaw 2018, number 2000.119, a map amendment to SLR 1 for 331 and 343 Molliet Street South, and part 2 is for zoning and development amendment bylaw 2018, number 2120 for text amendment to SLR 1. I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Greer, second by Councillor Chandler. Discussion? Patterson, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little bit of clarification because is there current construction on this property now? There isn't, right? So it's prior to the development of the property that they're asking to have it zoned for the small lot residential. Is that correct? Okay, I'm getting a nod that that's correct. And so we haven't actually seen anything of what they're proposing for this piece of property at this point in time?
Go ahead.
If I may, Your Worship, just to remind Council, this was brought forward. The applicant did a presentation to Council a few months back, and this was where the applicant discussed rooftop, small lot with carriage homes. So
Okay.
it's kind of a self-contained little cul-de-sac. It was the proposal that came forward, just to remind Council.
Thank you. I would greatly appreciate that.
Can you put it up there, please? Okay, so we're just bringing up, there it is. Can we zoom in on it a little bit? Just on the parking lot part. Does everybody understand what we're talking about or where we're talking here? It's immediately right over here. Okay, so what we have is about 1/3 of the grassed area immediately behind City Hall is being proposed to be a parking lot, to replace the parking lot that we're removing by the sale of the land across the street. This land is not, I repeat the words, not parkland. It is just grassed lands that are there. Never has been a parkland. It's never been anything related to it. So staff estimate the cost to do this development of being about $430,000. And it's, as I say, it really is, if you look at it, the corner of the building of the PCC, as you can see it, is that small red line at the very top there. So it's an entrance in. There'll be actually significantly more parking than what there is currently across the street. And that's basically what we're talking about. So I need a motion, or I'd like to make the motion that staff be directed to commence the process to convert a portion of this land behind Parksville Civic and Technology Center and adjacent to Stanford Place into a formal public parking, considering the appropriate means to relocate, replace memorial plaques and trees that may be affected, and preparing appropriate design, approval, and budget process to facilitate this project being completed in 2020. There are a few, and I say few, there's a limited number of very small trees of about yay big around out there. There's one or two larger trees that would, obviously we would propose being scooped and moved into the other area. And so no trees would be sacrificed in this particular process. So I need a mover and a seconder for the, or a seconder, sorry, a seconder, I moved it, yeah, by Councillor Greer. Discussion. Councillor O'Brien.
Love it. I'm pretty sure I had my hand up first. Anyhow, so I really do appreciate staff and the mayor's initiative of trying to establish parking with the sale of the Jensen property. It's greatly needed. Although looking at this map, I'm not I would disagree a bit that it's not just green space. It's that it is an amazing green space, and to lose it is always a bit of a challenge and everything for me whenever we lose green space in our community. But I'm wondering why we would not look at having another entrance on Craig Street rather than just the entrance in behind the PCTC entrance there, and why we wouldn't have a secondary. Just knowing how busy it is behind City Hall, even today, for parking to come into this meeting, there wasn't any. And so I'm kind of assuming that this probably may not be the last drawing, and that we will be looking at that. And I'm relieved that the memorial trees will be relocated, and I do like the retaining wall of greenery. My other, and I hesitate to say it, but had we considered having any paid parking in this parcel? Through you, the mayor, to our CAO.
Thank you. CAO.
If I may, this was not a staff initiative. This was a request just to provide a conceptual layout, and so we're definitely open to changing it around. Our engineering staff just wanted to kind of, using our city standards for sizes of parking spaces and family spaces and handicap spaces, they just wanted to provide some indication for council of how many stalls you could fit in a certain configuration. So absolutely doable to change and have an access off Craig. And then the other option for paid parking is certainly one that staff could look into. Councillor Patterson will probably recall we did have a council resolution a few years back to look into that for the whole city, but specifically for the Jensen block, and then of course the Jensen block was under flux. So we didn't move forward with that one at the time, but it is definitely something that council could direct us to look into.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, I have some concerns, and it's not that it's a bad plan necessarily, but I think I'd like us to look at a few other options and have a discussion about that. First of all, one of the things that concerns me is that I think we still need to sit down as a council and get a long-term vision for how we want our city to grow. And along with that, parking is a huge issue. So right now we have an RFP for a pool, recreation. I get worried about ripping up green spaces. So some of the thoughts that I came up with, that we might look at other options, and I don't know whether staff might be able to price these out for us or give us some, cost them out for us. But instead of doing this sort of wholesale change to our grassy area, that we might look at designating one-way streets in the downtown core and adding angled parking, utilize existing small empty downtown lots, maybe lease vacant downtown lots from developers. This could be in lieu of consideration that we might want to tax them for empty lot, especially the ones that are in disrepair. Perhaps we could revisit the transportation plans to redesign 19A downtown core to 2-lane and add parking, bike lanes, and wider sidewalks. We could limit parking times in key areas. We could consider pay parking in key areas. And we could also require that downtown developers add sufficient tenant and guest overflow parking to new builds, preferably underground. Just a few options that I think are worthwhile discussing before we make a decision, especially since I think we do need to discuss long-term plan and our vision for Parksville. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to reiterate some comments that were already made, thanks for those. I strongly object to the destruction of this park space being paved over to create a parking lot. This is an incredible green space created by our own Parks Department at considerable expense and include an amazing collection of trees. And I really differ my opinion on the significance of the trees that are already there, because there's a considerable amount of trees there that are very mature and doing very well. And they were actually specially selected by the Parks Department. And they're thriving out there. And anyways, it's an amazing location. It's used by many members of our community as well, as includes memorial plaques, for people purchase memorial plaques for that area, for their loved ones and so forth. And now we're going to put a parking lot on it. So really, the other significance is that, like, when the food truck had their food truck night, their food truck gala at the PCC, it was covered with people eating out there because it was a lovely, lovely day, and people were all over the green space, and they were all over it eating their foods and having a great time. It was a great social gathering spot, and it just become that because it's so beautiful. So the thing is that then it was even pointed out to me that children use that as their bunny slope when it snows, because the community park hill is too steep. So they're all over here on the little mogos here because they're here. So every snow time, it's a great place for little kids to play. And it's a wonderful spot. And the other thing that concerns me, of course, too, is that the PCC, there's some consideration, as they mentioned in their last presentation, that they may be doing a daycare center, which requires green space to operate the daycare. The Boys and Girls Club has suggested that as well. And so I'd be concerned that we're losing that green space and perhaps the option of using that space for a daycare. And really, like this day and age, the current goal is to increase our green canopy and to implement aggressive planting programs to offset carbon emission and not destroy existing park space. I understand the need to find parking locations. I get it, to offset the Jensen Road property, which I believe can be studied by ourselves to examine many other options. There is other members of our community have sent me a piece of property that are for sale in the general area that would cost about the same as what you have proposed anyways, as a fee anyways, to destroy the park next door. But the thing is that, and there are other locations in the area that would be suitable for parking that I think need to be explored. And we can do that without having a huge, big consultant or anything, because I believe that we can take care of that ourselves. So other than encouraging Joni Mitchell to come and start singing Pave Paradise and put up a parking lot, I would like to discount this until further study has been done to locate the parking in a separate location. I will not support this motion.
Councillor Frass.
Thank you. I won't be nearly as dramatic about this. I think that what we have here as an options is great to be considering. I appreciate the staff putting in the time to give us an idea, a concept to look at, and that, as well as Councillor Patterson's remark about the other entrance. I think those are good points to consider, as are things like perhaps looking at utility services, if there's going to be utility services available in a parking spot like this. The food truck festival that we had before was very successful. I think this area would make a really good space to be able to do a festival, just the layout even of it, having that walk around ability. I also see a place like this being utilized really well for market space if they were looking to expand any market space. Since we have sold the property for the Jensen property, we are needing to find some kind of solution for parking for staff and public that utilize that space. It was a very heavily utilized parking area. I think the proximity to the PCTC is important. So I think this is a good concept to be looking at and exploring a little bit further. The green space that is out in the back there, this is only a small portion of it that we're considering for parking lot. It still extends well beyond the PCC building out to the end. There's plenty of space for people to sled, enjoy, eat, sit down on. So I don't have quite the concern that we're removing a community amenity and trading it out. I see this as being actually very complementary to it as well. So those are my thoughts on it. And again, thanks to staff for putting together this concept.
Councillor Chandler.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, sorry.
I concur with Councillor Fraz's comments here. I think by looking at the footprint of this, there's definitely not what I had originally expected to be losing in the way of the green space. It's interesting that we can all talk about how it's used and when it's used. And I honestly, the only time I've ever seen anybody on it is during that food truck festival. That's the only time. I'm not discounting what somebody's saying, but I just feel that in this particular instance, because it's really only encroaching upon our parking lot where we park for these meetings, up to that point, I think that's a very good use of space to replace the parking stalls that are across the street. So with that being said, there's still lots of room behind there where people can sit and have their breaks from Stanford Center, and all along where the back end of the PCC is where people want to sit. And if they want to have a lunch out there, I think it still gives that the opportunity of that. So I would, I just feel that this is a really good starting point at this stage, and I'm certainly not against it, but I would like to do a bit more, investigation of it and have a look at it and see how far it actually takes up. Thank you.
I will speak to this. First off, I know it sounds so exciting to call it park space. It is not park space. Secondly, the number of trees that are on there, you got to go out there and look at them again, because there's probably less than 6 or 7 trees in this whole parking spot that is being taken and moved. The rest of them are not being changed. You can see them all in the drawings there, that there's one larger tree that I can see right from here, but other than that, most of the trees have been worked around and will continue to be worked around on that. So we're not losing the canopy in Parksville for this. We have to have this parking space. There's too many cars being parked across the street that will not have a home come August when that property changes ownership. 1/3 of the space, 2/3 is still available, and it's all behind the PCC. So the people could have squished a little tiny bit more, I suppose, for the truck festival, considering there was probably only about 20 or 30 people back there. And secondly, I come here every day. Every day I'm in this office, and a lot of times on the weekends, and I have yet, other than the campers that were camping back there, seen anybody using this, save and except for Remembrance Day and a couple of other incidental uses. This is not a highly used piece of property. Secondly, the staff tell me that it costs about $6,000 a year to keep that grass cut and trimmed and work around that area that we're planning to make into a parking lot for the whole thing. Yes. So, so that's a couple of $1,000s identified for that particular place. So having said all of that, this is a great use of this land. It's something that we can do. We have lots of grass around this particular building, and we've got 2/3 more land back there that can be used. And now I'm back around to Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you or to our CAO, or perhaps you're able to answer the question yourself. The total, including contingency for the parking, is $430,500. So we're looking at taking the two pieces of the two parcels of the 8 on Jensen that were for parking and applying it to this. So what is that dollar amount? Does that more than cover the cost of the?
Go ahead. I'll let the CAO answer that.
Thank you, sir.
If I may, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Patterson, it's roughly about 230,000, I believe, is what needs to be credited back to the parking reserve. So it's about half. But the intent, I think, would be that the proceeds from that sale would be where that $430,000 comes from during budget process.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think one of the concerns I also have is cost, and that's why I wanted to discuss other options so we could do a bit of a comparison. Let's say if we're going to get enough parking just from, let's say, redesigning the downtown, as I said, with one-way streets, et cetera. But I believe I asked our CAO about staff parking, and if I'm correct, staff do not park in that lot across the street that's being sold? They do.
Sure.
If I may, Your Worship, some staff do park over there. Other staff park at PCTC. So we actually just discussed today figuring out exactly how many staff, but we only have about 30 people that work here. So some park along the street on Craig, some park in that gravel area, and some park in the PCTC lot.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing I just want to make mention, because we were talking if you did do this, and it's not that it's the wrong location, or it makes sense if you look at it that way. I'm just concerned about spending that kind of money if there are less expensive ways to reconfigure road paint, let's say, and do angled parking. But we have to remember that we've got the 75th birthday celebration and other celebrations that are going to be going on this year. So in the proposal, I believe that you wanted this to start right away. The construction would be right away. And of course, the birthday isn't until June 19th. So just something else to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I guess the question would probably be to our CAO. Regarding the spaces that are already on Jensen right now in the gravel parking lot, approximately how many vehicles are parked there on a Monday through Friday basis, like on a daily basis? Do we have a count on how many?
Oops, if I may, Your Worship, only just what I would know from eyeballing it, being here every day, I would say there's 50 cars every single day. Not including weekends. I'm not typically there on the weekends, but I would guess a large portion of those folks using it are work staff and people using the downtown services. With only 30 staff here, and I know at least 10 I can think of off the top of my head that park over in the PCTC area, and another 10 that park on Craig. I would say there's probably about 10 staff, but it is definitely very heavily used by folks who are working downtown or accessing downtown services. And I would eyeball, I don't know if anyone else is here almost every day, but I would say 50 cars minimum, and it could be sometimes it does overflow towards the grass area, so that would be more like maybe 75. I've not counted them.
Thank you, because I note on the proposed plan here, 78 stalls we're going to get out of this space out here. Because for those that are always complaining that there's not enough parking, as I understand it, when we talked about Memorial, the city owns 2 lots on both sides that are city-owned lots. However, and the downtown merchants are saying we need more parking for our shops, not our staff, but for our customers. And yet there's not a sign there. I went there today just to double check. There's not a sign there that says parking. Like city parking, like, you know, the standard city parking sign, the blue P. on either one of those lots, so no one would know, if I just moved here, I wouldn't know that that was city parking. So to shop downtown, to go have a coffee down at the Brim, I wouldn't know that I could park there for free. But my other point is that all those parking spots that we're actually providing, I thought, for the businesses to attract people downtown, is being taken up by the employees of the businesses downtown. So there's no regulation, like there's not a 2-hour minimum or a maximum type of thing. There's nothing on it, but there's no identification first on the parking and no identification on either side of the street. So I'm thinking that all that I'm getting at is that if this goes through, that if these 78 stalls are built, like who's going to be filling that? And is it actually going to satisfy all the requirements for the PCTC and the PCC type of thing as the immediate area, but it is also going to satisfy the employees that are using the gravel lot that park down the road as well, that actually work down the road. That's my concerns, is the numbers only. That's my point.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm totally behind this project. I think it's needed. I don't think there's another area in town that could give us that many spaces. And it only takes up a third of that area, so if we have childcare or anybody else wants to use the other park part of it, there's lots of area there for them to be used. But going forward, we're going to need this parking down in this area. There's no way that we can do without it. So I'm totally behind it.
Just a point of curiosity, comment, if you would. 10 years ago, when we looked at putting one-way traffic in the downtown core, the cost then was estimated by the engineering department at over $10 million. So I think that just gives you an idea of what that cost was, because I'm totally in favor of the idea, by the way, but that's what it was then. Yeah. Yes, and it is on camera, just for that. All right. Any other discussion? I'd like to call the question then. All those in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. South Shore, number 5B is gone. Yes. Pardon? But didn't we do this one already?
It was Councillor Wilson's notice of motion last time, but it's already been
Oops, sorry, thank you. Councillor O'Brien, would you like to introduce a motion regarding the following topic, council meeting dates?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Your Worship. At this time, I'd like to propose a motion that council reconsider the dates that were removed for the August regular meeting, council meeting dates, to re-implement them as was originally suggested and not omit them at this time.
I need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Patterson, discussion? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship. The reasoning for this motion was due to the fact that I guess I was naive to kind of roll along with it, just canceling all the meetings in August. I was kind of led to believe that it was a slow time and we really don't need it and nobody's really around. But after last year and realizing that other councils prior to this always had meetings in August, and also with the knowledge that in this particular year, the UBCM follows in September as it always does, and instead of 2 meetings in the month of September, there's actually only 1 slated for the month of September. So that would put us actually 3 meetings behind. And I feel it's disrespectful that we took this job and we knew what the dates of the meetings were, and yes, we have the control to change that, I agree. But I also know that we had a considerable amount of delegations and so forth that complained to us that they couldn't get any delegation time in front of council because it was all booked up, and they had an issue in June and they said, no, come back and see us in November. And all of our meetings have been very busy, so to take these out of the loop type of thing, I think is not doing the business of the city properly, and I think we could do a better job if we met in the month of August, just as was laid out originally. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Patterson?
Just reiterating a little bit of Councillor O'Brien, the first Monday of August is obviously a holiday, so it would move to the Wednesday. And again, I think we have 5 weeks in August with additional 5 Mondays. I realize that it's still busy time of year. Some of our liaison positions take time off in the summertime, but others don't. And I do, as I seconded the motion, agree with Councillor O'Brien that yes, not all of council may attend all of our meetings, but if we have quorum, then I'm very much in favor of having those 2 meetings added back on. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, my turn. First off, I resent the idea of being told that you took the job knowing that this was in August. We took the job knowing the salaries were what they were, and yet it was you that made the motion to increase the salary. So you're kind of defeating the argument on both sides here. We took this job, but yes, we also changed the idea of council because it wasn't necessary. We went through all of last year in August, and honestly, the world didn't come to an end. Nothing got behind. There wasn't a single project delayed. There was nothing that affected it other than to say we didn't have a council meeting. There was nothing that was a result of delaying these council meetings, and it's the exact same situation again this year. So staff also need to take vacation to avoid carrying over liability for the city. And if there's no council reports due or meetings held, they can catch up on the operational items and use the quieter summertime for vacation. Citizens also take vacation in the summer months, and so council should avoid discussing critical items when residents cannot participate due to vacation commitments. And if necessary, a special meeting can be called within 24 hours to discuss a specific urgent question. I don't see any purpose in delaying August or having August meetings in this particular time. For the life of me, I just don't understand it. So I'll be opposing this. Thank you. And I'll call the question. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm just curious if I could ask our CAO why can staff still take holidays, or they still must take holidays in the summer, whether we're off or not, I would think, would they?
If I may, we always have to basically provide coverage. So we try to avoid taking, like those of us that come to council all the time, so myself, Amanda, Deb, Sarah, we try to avoid taking vacation if there's a lot going on at council, just because this isn't just, there's a lot of work that goes into putting the agendas together and everything. But I mean, we do permit people to take vacation. It just requires either coverage, so an acting person would come to the council meeting, or in certain cases, I would present that person if it was a director. But having no council meetings means you could approve vacation for more than one person. Like, we don't have to provide coverage. So I could authorize vacation for Deb and Amanda at the same time. So it's not that it's not doable. People do take vacation and miss a council meeting every now and then. But if there's a time where we know that there isn't a council meeting, that's usually, like last year, we all basically tried to take that couple of weeks off at the same time so that we weren't impacting the council schedule.
So then, is it true that you could get more work done if we're off? Is that?
If I may, Your Worship, if we had no council, we could get lots of work done. No, I'm just joking. certainly it does give us a bit of time to catch up on some things, but, you know, we often have special meetings too that come up, so I don't really want this to be a staff thing. We'll do what you guys need us to do. If there's council meetings, we are at them, we prepare for them. We will work around our vacation schedule for that, so I respectfully don't think that should be the deciding factor. But
Thanks. As much as they say not to be about staff, to me, it does add a very good component of the quality of life and the attractiveness of this job to attract and retain staff based on how we are able to work with them. No different than we adjusting the council times. One of the benefits is that it's not holding them through really long days. In August, while there were lots of delegations that if there was meetings, have opportunities for delegations, we see meetings like tonight where we have no delegations. So there's not to say that delegations can't be spread out throughout the year as we have lots of space for them as well. The mayor did make a good point that we can always call a meeting if there's things that need to be addressed or come up, and that can happen very quickly. A couple council members ourselves can call that meeting too, so it doesn't always have to be directed by the mayor. I think it worked well this last year, and I do like the fact that it allows the time to catch up on some of the tasks rather than, as you see after this meeting, we always end up having more staff workload to do. So having a little bit of chance to breathe, I think is a good thing.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, my only comments is that, you know, I went back as far as I could into the archived videos, and somehow the previous councils were able, and the staff were able to accommodate the August meetings. And so they were able to do it. So I understand staff are very flexible with their holidays and their time to cover a council meeting. So I'm just saying that it's certainly doable.
That's because we're better than anybody else has been. That's why. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of canceling?
that we add two back in.
Pardon?
Sorry, two back. I was asking what the motion was.
Oh.
That the two additional council meetings be scheduled.
Yes, he wants, the motion is to add the two council meetings back. So all those in favor of adding two council meetings back in August? Opposed? Defeated. Motions to be considered. Councillor Wilson, would you like to introduce the motion regarding the the topic of this Parksville Civic and Technology Center signage?
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I have another motion to follow this one as well, notice of motion. So a little background on this motion. I have received some feedback from a number of citizens that the directional signage outside City Hall is insufficient, and there's often confusion between the PCC and the PCTC building. People here come for meetings or to attend events at the PCC often find it hard to determine where they are supposed to be, and I would also add to that that they can't figure out where City Hall is to pay their bills, especially if they do not take the Jensen Avenue entrance. I also believe the signage inside City Hall could be greatly improved with the city's new sign shop equipment. I'm hoping we can improve the signage and enhance the presence of City Hall from the street. As a result, I would like to make the following motion: that staff be directed to develop a signage plan for the interior and exterior of the PCTC building and submit a report with a proposed budget to council for its consideration. And this could be dependent upon staff time. I don't think this needs to be a rush.
I need a seconder. Councillor Patterson. Discussion? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just not sure if it requires a friendly motion or not to have this added on to budget deliberations in March. Through you to the CAO, if she could answer that for me.
Answer.
If I may, Your Worship.
No, answer Councillor Patterson's question.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I think that is a very short timeline, given some of the other priorities. And so I think if council is okay to wait a little bit, if we could bring this back to council in the fall for approval for the 2021 budget, that would be greatly appreciated. We certainly will try to get to it sooner than that, but I'm just conscious of, we just have a new parks manager who I don't want him to go running for the hills. And he does have a few other priorities with the Parks Committee and other things, so if that would be agreeable. That's my request.
Can we add a friendly amendment to have this brought back in the fall with, is that clear?
That's fine with me. I think the main issue is that people are going to be happy that we're looking at it.
Any other comments? Councillor Fraz?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this forward, Councillor Wilson. I think that's very observant of you, and it was a good recommendation to come forward. It's something I do support. It does speak to one of those things, like I say, after our meetings, council usually has more workload, and it sounds like perhaps this is something they might tackle in August. So.
And they can do it now.
Any other questions? All right, let's call the question. All those in favor of delay doing this in fall? All, yeah. Okay, does any member have a motion, a notice of motion? I knew that. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. I know you want to hear this other motion. So being that today's Committee of the Whole meeting went really well, I think, I would like to, ask Council to consider having another Committee of the Whole meeting, and there's no rush for this, to discuss another one of our strategic priorities, which is economic development. And I think that this could be a motion I'd like to introduce, that we hold a COTW, a Committee of the Whole, in a few months or longer if necessary for staff, to discuss economic development pertaining to downtown revitalization, traffic, transportation, landscaping, tree buffer options that support the beautification, economic growth, and walkability of the downtown core.
You're just making that as a notice of motion, so, okay. Thank you. I, too, have one. And that staff be directed to provide 3 metal garbage cans with the City of Parksville logo on it and design to the Parksville and District Historical Society to place on the property for public use with no obligation for the city staff to remove the garbage, and that is necessary funds be taken from council contingency. That's my notice of motion for the next meeting. Okay, and the other one that I have as well is that staff be directed to prepare and design a location option for Parksville Tourism Selfie Bench and provide recommendations to council on budget and timelines for installation. Any others? I think that's enough, eh? Okay. New business. Does any member on council have any new business? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Executive Director of the Chamber reminded me by being here, and that tomorrow is the opening for the Oceanside Initiatives here in Parksville, and I don't know the exact address. But it is at 4 o'clock, and I would welcome anyone on council to join me and seeing the new space and welcoming the other partners and that as well. So it is on the highway and right next to...
I have the address here if you like. It's 174 East Island Highway.
174 East Island Highway. So that's at 4 o'clock tomorrow. No, four on that, so I welcome everyone to attend. This is a great week, and that also in Parksville for shoulder season type events, and that it's the Untapped and Swirl event in Parksville, which brings quite a few people outside of the community into the community, and we're becoming really quite well known for it. So I just wanted to mention that, because part of my liaison positions is the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism and the Chamber, and we talk a lot about that we're really busy in the summertime, but we're busy, in some of the off-season, and we're trying to look at different events and different things that we can accomplish as well in the shoulder season. So thank you.
Before we proceed to special business, I'd like to remind the public that our next council meeting will be held on Monday, March the 2nd at 3 p.m. And I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation pursuant to Section 91A, C, and E of the Community Charter. Council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to identifiable individuals, labor, and land. Needs a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Fraz, second by Councillor Wilson. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Yeah, we'll take 5 minutes